The famous Spartan 300 stand on the precipice of their destiny, knowing in their hearts that this will be their final stand. Before them is an army out of place and out of time, their ferocity and massacres earning them the nickname the Scourge of God or the Devil's Horsemen. Join us as we take you on a journey of what-ifs in our next tale of hypothetical battles. This is History Unfolded, Spartans versus Mongols. King Leonidas, the legendary Spartan king, gathers his army. It's on short notice, and with the other Greek city-states reluctant to help, he manages to amass a small but elite army of hoplites and other fighters, numbering 5,000 men strong, including his personal guard of the famed 300. Leonidas marches with his men for the pass at Thermopylae, a site chosen for its strategic and defensive advantage in funneling a much larger force into a much smaller area. It will allow him to buy the maximum time needed for the other city-states, as well as Sparta, to defend themselves and amass more forces. There in the fields near Anthela, nearly 10,000 horses and men are camped. The Spartans don't know this yet, but they've just laid eyes on visitors from 1,500 years in the future. The name of these warriors instilled fear in Europe and the Middle East for almost 2 centuries. Before the battle begins though, let's see how the armies stack up. The armor of the average hoplite varied, with the Spartans being the most heavily armored with the highest quality equipment. They wore bronze armor, a leather cuirass with bronze scales known as a linothorax came across the chest, shoulders and hips. The famous korivos bronze helmet covered the cheeks and nose, and bronze greaves protected the shins. The centerpiece of their armor was the meter-long bronze circular hoplon shield, which they would use to great effect in defensive lines. The hoplites' main weaponry was the dory, a 7 to 8 foot long wooden spear with a bronze or iron tip. The spear was essential for the hoplites' preferred phalanx formation. The secondary weapon wielded was the double-edged xiphos short sword, also made of bronze or iron, used for close-quarter combat, mainly thrusting and cutting. It was a last resort used when one's spear was broken. On the other hand, let's take a look at the Mongol army, consisting of 80% horses and 20% infantry, and every single Mongol able to wield a bow with deadly precision. The 10,000 Mongols don't look like much to the uninitiated. Most Mongols were commoners, and even nobles had a shaggy appearance, unkempt hair, and wore felt and woolen clothing over their leather armor. The Mongols looked like a disorganized batch of barbarians, a far cry from the Spartans. Most soldiers had composite bows that could fire arrows at over 200 meters. Their close-up weaponry was usually the saber, a curved half-a-meter-long blade used for slashing enemies from horseback. Most Mongols were horse archers, and archery played a major part in their lives. The elite among them were heavy cavalry, wearing steel and lamellar armor with leather underneath to provide further protection, alongside conical steel helmets with nose protection. Jochi Khan and his 1,000 royal guards wore extravagant ornate steel armor, the Khans often being tipped with silver or gold. Scarcely 2,000 Mongols are of the noble class with high-quality armor, whilst 5,000 light cavalry archers would be much lighter armored, relying on their speed on horseback for protection. 2,000 light infantry with mostly wooden shields and similarly light armor would swiftly attack and support the horses, with 1,000 men left for siege weapons and logistics. Now let's press play on this encounter to see how this plays out. The Mongols, aware that they've somehow ended up in a strange place completely separated from reinforcements and with no clue where they are in a paranoid and somewhat panicked state. Jochi, their leader, however, is not so easily shaken, and with the blood of his father flowing through his veins, he witnesses an enemy force closing in along the pass. It's clear that this army knew they were coming and means to fight. The Mongols array themselves and prepare for battle. They mount their horses, and the army of 10,000 Mongols ride to the beach, led by Jochi. The Spartans are somewhat perplexed. Instead of facing hundreds of thousands of Persians, they're facing only thousands of horses, and instead of Persians, these horsemen looked like barbarians. It doesn't matter the enemy, however. The Spartans and their Greek allies ready themselves for battle. Leonidas sounds the call to battle and readies himself to face this new enemy. The Mongols close and the Spartans are ready. Only small amounts of horses can get through the pass as it is really narrow, limiting the Mongols' mobility greatly. They aren't stupid, however, and in a mock charge they come within 100 meters of the shield and spear wall. Leonidas expects a charge and yells, "Brace!" as the phalanx stills, spears facing out like an incredibly spiny wall of bronze. It's a feint, however, and the Mongols turn away at the last second, firing an incredibly precise volley of arrows at the Greeks, trying to provoke them into a charge. Leonidas yells, "Hold!" and the Greeks hold steady, knowing that defense is their priority. priority and shield themselves with their hoplons. It is here that the disparity in weapons technology is keenly felt by the Greek allies. Wood or only bronze-plated shields feel the bite of high carbon steel. Some pierce through, shocking the defenders. No arrows of the time had such penetrating ability, and whilst only injuries occur, it leaves a mark on the psyche of those who were used to relying on their shield as a steadfast defense. The Mongols have no way of knowing this, of course, but see that their arrow rain isn't as effective as they'd hoped and see their enemy has discipline. The Mongols must pivot around this new information, and instead of relying on archery, Jochi devises a plan. He commands the light infantry now to march into the fray, hoping to lure the Greeks out of their disciplined formation. As the light infantry come into the pass, Leonidas grins. These enemies will not take the pass with ruffians alone. With the threat of those strange arrows gone, Leonidas shouts forward to the ranks, and they begin their advance against the lightly armored opponents in front of them. Leonidas and the 300 stand at the fore, their allies supporting them. The Mongol charge comes to 200 meters and Leonidas yells, "Charge!" The Mongols are taken aback, not expecting a phalanx to move as quickly as it does, putting somewhat of a wrench in their plans. Without much time to prepare or aim, Mongol javelins fly at the Greeks, and a horrifying fate befalls those struck. Many javelins pierce through the relatively thin armor of the hoplon, and whilst there aren't many javelins flying, where they do land true, the Greek behind the shield is skewered, including some Spartans. Sabers rattle against spears and shield as the battle proper begins. The reach of the phalanx formation makes fighting the Greeks difficult for the Mongols, though their engagement doesn't last very long. The ploy has partially succeeded, and the Greeks are now fired up and ready to take the fight to the Mongols. This costs the Mongols though, as they are very lightly armored, and spears and swords alike find their mark in hundreds of dead Mongols that simply don't have the reach to fight the Greeks. Jochi Khan has been watching and has seen that the shields of their enemies are weak, and so armed with this knowledge he commands, "Retreat!" They feign a retreat, and as the Greeks begin to advance, they're peppered with arrows from the returning horses as their formation loosens and gaps appear in their shield wall. The Greeks' numbers are being whittled down under intense fire. The Mongols don't need to engage as the Greeks have limited range weaponry. Jochi realizes the major advantage the Mongols have, and with a sinister grin, brings forward a new weapon. Greek morale is high, and the Mongol heavy cavalry unit advances into the pass with long but bulky looking spears. The Greeks are almost relieved at the sight. Fighting cavalry is a phalanx specialty, their long spears making cavalry practically useless. King Leonidas, knowing they're dead if they remain still, orders the march forward once more to meet the cavalry head-on. The cavalry seems unfazed, however, and as the Greeks close to a few meters, Leonidas once more sounds the call to charge. Sadly for him, in this battle, it would be the last thing he said. The hundreds of heavy Mongol cavalry turn away, level their lances at the approaching shield wall, and light their lances. Hundreds of deafening explosions ring out as the Mongols utilize the famed fire lance, the direct ancestor of the modern gun, using gunpowder and technology from their conquests in China, now brought to this time. Projectiles fire out, and with no fear of retaliation, the Mongols lazily keep out of reach of the phalanx on horseback. For the Greeks, however, it is simply too much. King Leonidas leading the charge is struck as the blast sends shrapnel flying at speeds unheard of in ancient Greece, tearing through shields and dismembering those unfortunate enough not to have taken cover. The sight of seeing the Spartan king collapse and the deafening sounds of early gunpowder leave the Greek forces in disarray. In a panic, most of the Greeks retreat, while some soldiers remain steadfast. The steel-forged armor and weapons of the heavy Mongol cavalry easily brush off the attacks by the bronze-wielding Greeks. It swiftly turns into a massacre, as this is what the Mongols do best. Once their enemy is confused and weakened, they press the attack on horseback, far swifter than any runner, and cut down all their remaining enemies. Scarcely losing 1,000 men, the Mongols finish their rout of the Greeks and let out a victorious roar, signaling the end of the battle as the last remaining Greeks are spared, allowed to return back to their cities to sow fear for the Mongols' future conquests. Stepping away from the battle, it's painfully clear to see that the Spartans are completely outmatched by an enemy with far superior weapons technology, armor, and tactics. Sadly, there's no scenario where the Spartans come out victorious, even when they play to their utmost strength. They are simply no match for the Mongols, their technology, and their bloodthirsty desire to conquer. And that brings us to the end of our video. Did you expect the Mongols to be such a fearsome force to be reckoned with? If you were King Leonidas, what tactics might you have tried to implement to gain an edge? If you have any battles you'd like to see in the future, let us know in the comments, and we'll make it happen. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel and help us grow. If you missed our last versus video, here's a link to that too. Thanks for watching.